Welcome to the Azeroth Times, the podcast where I tell you what I find in game and what's going on. So, you want to play a character in Shadowlands? Well, I'm going to talk about tank specs, healing specs, range DPS specs, and melee DPS specs in the next few episodes. Today I'm going to talk about tank specs. So I'm going to go over, kind of quick, how to play a tank in Shadowlands, their strengths and recommendations. So if you don't know what you should play in Shadowlands, choosing a class or spec can be really difficult, especially for players that are coming back. And so much has changed from some classes during the Shadowlands testing cycle. Because some of them are just getting a few changes made, like the gameplay tools. But some are actually having their spells and talents overhauled entirely. So I'm going to talk about those tanks that you love to play and what to expect from those tank classes you like to play with. Now, I'm not doing a tier list, so, because I'm not going to be delving into the comparison between all the specs, because pre-patch is around the corner, and there's still some time until Shadowlands launches. So, Blizzard is still making adjustments to classes, covenants, and legendaries, all of which will kind of greatly influence any attempt to rank any of the classes. So just remember, some of these could change greatly and some of them might not change at all. You never know. So I'm just going to give you kind of an idea of what classes you might want to play in Shadowlands, whether on the tank spec today. So, I want to talk about Blood Death Knight and how they play in Shadowlands. So now, on Death Knights, they're one of the two tanks in the game focus around reactively healing some of the damage they take, instead of outright preventing it. So, the entire toolkit revolves around a number of small cooldowns and the use of Death Strike to undo most of the damage that they take, or more precisely, 25% of the damage they take for the 5 seconds prior to actually using it. Now, the resources are runes, regenerating at a static pace, and runic power, acquired by spending runes. The conversion factor for one of the other depends on the spell you use to spend runes. Most spells with, don't count Heart Strike, provide 10 RP per rune. Heart Strike provides up to 25. Runic power is used to fuel Death Strike, and that's what gives your health. Now, this class will start at level 8 instead of 55. All races are going to be available to play Death Knight, and the race choice outside of very specific encounters is more of a cosmetic choice than any performance one. So, any race you want to be, you're going to be able to be a Death Knight, and it really doesn't matter kind of which race you pick to be your Death Knight. Now, I'm going to talk about Vengeance Demon Hunter, how they play in Shadowlands. The Vengeance Demon Hunter is the dual-wielding leather tank specialization with a mix of damage reduction and self-healing with high mobility and enemy control. Now, they are not fully based around preventing damage like warriors, and the toolkit does allow them to reduce significant amounts of damage. In addition, they are one of the two specs that can heal based on damage taken, with the other being, of course, Blood Death Knights. Now, the core of Vengeance is based around regenerating and spending soul fragments, which heal us for 6% of our damage taken in the 5 seconds before they absorbed. So, the more damage you do, the more healing you can do. Now, they have a resource bar comprised of Fury, but surprisingly is not their main source, and in most cases can safely be ignored. Now, the new Demon Hunters will start at level 8 rather than 100, due to being a hero class and they're restricted to either being a blood elf if the horde or a night elf if they're alliance. Now for Guardian Druid, how they play in Shadowlands. Now, Guardian Druids are one of the best mitigation tanks in the game, with Iron Fur being their main mitigation spell. Now, this allows them to easily reach armor cap, reducing physical damage intake by a massive amount. Any damage that does not get through their thick fur is quickly healed up by frenzied regeneration. And the combination of these two spells make them a very sturdy tank. They take a steady amount of damage and do an excellent job at smoothing damage intake overall. That, along with their health pools, make Guardian Tank a tank that healers love to heal. Now, their resources rage. And we have a rage bar while in bear form. And their tanking process heavily revolves around the ebb and flow of rage regeneration. Using rage regeneration spells like Mangle and Thrash to allow them to, for their tanking spells for mitigation in the form of Iron Fur and Frenzied Regeneration. They primarily deal damage with their 2 damage over time spells, Moonfire and Thrash, along with their AoE filler spell, Swipe. Their single target abilities are Mangle, which generates rage, and Maul, which can be used to dump excess rage. Now, since they're Druid class, they have a cool shape-shifting spell. Now, that allows them to shift into multiple forms, such as bear form, cat form, and travel form, to access their unique powers and abilities, like an instant cast flying form with travel form, or stealth and cat form with prowl. So that's pretty cool, huh? And now, the Brewmaster Monk, how they play. Now, unlike other tanks, monks stagger, that's the spell, stagger, damage, spreading out a large portion of the damage taken as a 10-second DOT, or dot, which is 13 seconds with talents. This gives monks enormous advantage at living through burst damage, and burst damage is generally, what kills tanks. Monks also have Purifying Brew and Celestial Brew, allowing them to clear a portion of staggered damage and shield themselves from damage. Now, this provides monks with both reactive and proactive defense tools and gives them the most complete toolkit of any tank. Now, their collection of defensive cooldowns is fairly limited, but that is more than made up for with stagger. Now, offensively, Brewmaster monks play around using Keg Smash on cooldown, and because their primary skill is an AoE, their offensive ability priorities don't change significantly between single target and AoE. Brewmaster monks also have exceptional mobility, arguably the best of any tank spec. And now, Protection Paladin. Now, as a Paladin, you wield the light to support your allies and smite your foes. Remember that. A simple description of the core gameplay of the fun of the Protection Paladin is throwing your shield around like Captain America, slamming your enemies with your shield, and making sure your allies survive the dangerous moments that come up in combat. Now, some of the basics are you use Avenger Shield, Judgment, and Hammer of the Righteous to build threat and holy power. Then, use Shield of the Righteous or Word of Glory to spend the holy power and keep yourself alive. Then you can also use blessings like Blessing of Freedom, Blessing of Sacrifice, or abilities like Flash Heal to support your team. Use Hammer of Justice or Turn Evil to control your enemies and their actions. Use unique utility like Divine Shield or Blessing of Protection to make yourself immune to damage and debuffs. Select talent options like Blessing of Spell Warning and Hand of the Protector for an even greater depth of support. And now, Protection Warrior, how they play in Shadowlands. Now, Protection Warriors, they are the original tank spec. Along with Protection Paladins, they are one of the 2 tank specs that use a shield and a one-handed weapon. Protection Warriors are the spec that most fits into the archetypical tank role from the other RPGs and tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons. As original tank, Protection Warriors have a very large, well-established toolkit. They are one of the most versatile tanks and are a leading class in the following categories, which are damage mitigation, defensive cooldowns, dealing damage, offensive cooldowns, mobility, and crowd controlling enemies. The chief weakness of Protection Warrior is that it has no self-healing. It also requires a lot of resource and cooldown management. This can be extremely rewarding for an experienced player, but a little bit daunting as a newcomer. Alright, well that is it for this week. Next week I will go over the healing specs. See you then. This show is brought to you by Heartland Production Entertainment. If you'd like to help to make the show better, go to patreon.com/heartlandpae.